real quick, my name is Jenn Ballentine. I'm an independent evaluation consultant based in Decatur, Georgia. And I've had my own evaluation consulting firm since about 2009. Real quick, prior to that, I worked at the CDC as a public health analyst, but I did, survey, design and implementation, behavioral research, so quantitative, qualitative data collection and analysis. Actually, just kind of a funny story. So when I left CDC to start my own consulting business, I actually started out doing grant writing. So I've kind of been a grant writer consultant myself for a brief period of time. Having worked at a federal funding agency, I knew what it took to write a good application, because let me tell you, I reviewed a lot of them, and some of them needed a lot of work. So I knew what it kind of took to write strong proposals, and I thought, well, I can do this, and this could be interesting. I quickly realized grant writing is not really what I wanted to do, and I really wanted to return back to the data roots and working with data, collecting data, analyzing, summarizing those results. So kind of motored over towards evaluation. I hadn't really done evaluation at CDC. I'd done more primary, secondary research, but I knew the skills were, translatable. So got my first kind of big evaluation contract in 2009, and have been going strong ever since then with working with lots of different nonprofits and foundations in Atlanta, mostly. And from time to time, I do help some of my existing clients to kind of author the evaluation components of their applications, or I have worked with grant writers. So I kind of wanted to share about that today and just have a discussion and hear what other people might be doing in this area, and kind of what successes and challenges and lessons learned have been. So, should evaluators help write grants? Some people may say no. Other people may say, yeah. Whether you get paid or not, that's kind of a question I'll talk about a little bit later. But I definitely have drafted the evaluation sections of grant proposals and applications, like I said, both for existing clients or in collaboration with grant writer, and with the intent that I would be the evaluator if awarded. And that has worked out, in some cases. In other cases it hasn't, obviously. And I've worked both with kind of the independent grant writing consultant, as well as a larger sort of grant writing firm that has, works with sort of larger, more profitable nonprofits that to help sort of author all of their funding proposals. And those are kind of two different experiences, clearly. So how evaluators and grant writers, can work together in different ways, right? So sometimes, and this may be the case for you, I might just work solely with the grant writing consultant, the independent grant writing consultant. She's, got the relationship with the client, the nonprofit. She asked me to help. They're going to write me in, obviously, as the evaluator. And can I collaborate on that? Sometimes she might pull me into a meeting with the nonprofit client because, it would help to lend my expertise to the conversation for them to better understand what we need to do in order to strengthen the proposal, and for me to get the information I need to be able to craft really strong outcomes and an evaluation plan and component to that proposal. So again, this tends to happen more frequently with the independent, when I'm working with an independent evaluation consultant versus that larger grant writing firm. They kind of want to be the face, with their client, and I'm maybe just on the behind the scenes. And both have their ups and downs, right? But so why do this? Why should you may want to consider, working with other grant writing consultants or firms? Well, lots of different reasons, right? First, you can help write award-winning proposals, right? You can strengthen the evaluation component that will help. A lot of times, obviously, the overall grant, because you can't write that evaluation section without having kind of, the strong program goals and objectives, and you know, everything sort of ties together clearly. And if those proposals include you as the evaluator, obviously you get some business out of that, right? Here's this fraud is definitely going to win this proposal, right? So the other piece is that you may be able to help at least a tiny bit, maybe, to strengthen or start to strengthen that organizational capacity of that nonprofit. At the very least, you might get those gears turning, right? Let's say you are invited into a call or meeting with the nonprofit, and you're able to talk to them a little bit about evaluation. Maybe this is their first time working with an evaluator. You know, they have their grant writer consultant that they work with all the time, but they've never had an evaluation consultant that they've worked with. So you get to help at least lay the groundwork and thinking about why evaluation is important, how do you craft strong outcomes, and not just for this grant proposal, but overall, you know, as an agency, how it can benefit, how they can learn from that. So you get those, you might help to get those gears turning to start to build that internal capacity. Not always in every case, but that might be one benefit. And finally, of course, new relationships, right? You may get a connection with a potential new client, even if the grant isn't awarded. You know, perhaps you were able to have a call or meeting with that nonprofit and the grant writer. They now have gotten to know you a little bit better about what you're able to offer, how you work, what your approach is. And even if they don't get this particular grant, maybe they think of you in the future and they want to use your services or rely on your expertise again. So I'll be honest, this is probably a little bit more, you know, useful for the evaluator than the grant writer in terms of the new relationship, since they're the one maybe pulling you in. Although clearly I refer, you know, when folks come to me asking for grant writers, I have grant writing consultants that I refer to them, and, you know, we can help each other in that way. So, however, you know, the benefits can be great, can be many, but of course there's challenges. At least I've had some challenges. I don't know about others, but first being sort of that unclear roles and responsibilities, right? Remember this game? Yeah, no one likes to be the monkey in the middle, right? And you're like, I want to get the ball, I want to get out of here, it'll be on the side, right? So that is kind of sometimes what it's like to work with a grant writing consultant as the evaluator, because you're kind of that monkey in the middle. The grant writer is one maybe with the relationship with the nonprofit, and sometimes, like I said, you don't necessarily get to connect with the nonprofit. You're really relying on the grant writer to give you the information you need. They're kind of, you know, incorporating it into their work, and then, you know, providing that back to the client. So, you know, you can give your best advice, lend your expertise, but ultimately the grant writer is going to be the one to sort of pull together the final application, and they're going to be directed by the client, you know, with it's their discretion to sort of make final edits and revisions that you may not even know of or be aware of, because again, you don't necessarily have that direct relationship with them. You don't have that last word or final say necessarily. This was even sort of more pronounced with the large grant writing firm, just because there were a lot more cooks in the kitchen. You know, they might have like 4 consultants, you know, sort of grant writers are working, because these are large federal grants, right? Working on the application and pulling together the various pieces, and they're the front face with the client. So it's like even a little bit harder to kind of have your voice and be heard and not really feel like you're stuck in the middle kind of. So there's also, we feel like we're kind of speaking different languages, right? Grant writers are trained and hired to write winning proposals. The language they want to use doesn't always kind of line up with maybe what we would use to craft, you know, the realistic outcomes and what we can expect. And sometimes we got to kind of pull them down a little bit and kind of try to figure out how we can communicate you know, we're all working towards the same goal of helping that nonprofit write the strongest application, get that funding to be able to do good work and hopefully demonstrate the impact of their good work. But we have to be honest, we have to be realistic and transparent, and you know, we can't make it be something it's not, right? Or something they're not able to achieve. So and I think, you know, grant writers, they want to do that too. They at least the ones I work with are, you know, realize that, but also they're really trying to help, you know, their client look the best they possibly can look to be able to be, you know, awarded and be competitive. So it's a little bit tricky in that regard. And then I think there's sometimes there can be the time crunch, right? So the grant is due on Friday at 5 and it's Wednesday afternoon. The organization is still reviewing and revising the proposal, and whew, you're making last minute changes, and oh, that's a little nutty. So if you don't want to be in that kind of situation, and I have been in that situation before, unfortunately, and that one was kind of different. Like that was like an existing client of mine. They have a grant writing consultant. I'm their like evaluation consultant, and you know, it was kind of a last minute pull me in. Had they not been an existing client, you know, I probably would have said no, right? But since they've been a long-term client of mine, and I want to, you know, retain that relationship and keep that networking, I, you know, was able to do it, but it's not the best of circumstances. So, you know, it's obviously better to be very upfront about deadlines and timeframes, and, you know, only accept work when you're working with a grant writer, you know, that, you know, if they pull you in at the 11th hour, you're not going to be available, like, you know, but if they pull you in, you know, a month before the grant is due, and you have ample time to review the materials, work with them to, you know, help craft a strong evaluation section, you know, go through the revision process, because you know the client's going to come back and have multiple questions or comments or revisions before the grant due date. That's the ideal, of course, but doesn't always happen that way. So some things that I think you need to consider when collaborating. First is the ethics, right? Is it ethical? Some people don't think evaluators should write themselves into grants at all, while others are fine with it. Some people have a problem with evaluators getting paid to write like an evaluation section and then getting the grant, right? And, you know, writing themselves in. I've seen it both ways. So I've seen evaluation firms that also offer grant writing services, right? And sometimes they don't charge for those grant writing services, provided you include them as the evaluator, right? And hopefully they get those grants, then they become your evaluator. Other times I've seen, you know, some evaluation firms that offer grant writing services, and they charge fees for both of those services. So I'd be curious to, you know, I'd be curious to hear what people think about this, and kind of, you know, what experience others might have had with this. Then this question is about the fees, right? So to charge or not to charge? Do you kind of bank on the fact that the agency will get the grant and you'll get the contract since you're written in? How much time and effort do you invest? How often do you do this? So if you're an independent consultant, it's hard to invest this time for no to little return, right? Potentially. Or, you know, it really depends, obviously, again. So for me, when I was, you know, working with an independent consultant, and this just grant writing consultant, and this just happened not too long ago, she, you know, consulted me for the evaluation section of the grant. I helped her with that. I actually did, you know, get to have some calls with the clients. We had enough time. It wasn't the 11th hour. I did that part of the work pro bono. They wrote me in, then they were awarded the contract, and now I have an evaluation contract with them. They were awarded the grant. So in that instance, it worked out, right? Other times I may put in a lot of time and it doesn't pan out. So how do you establish like the boundaries and the expectations for how much time you can invest and what you're willing to, you know, to do or provide, and, you know, how many calls or meetings can you afford to kind of have? Obviously you want to get it right and you want to do it well. So you have to balance that. Now, when I was working for the sort of larger grant writing firm, obviously I had a contract with them. I had billable hours. You know, they paid for my time. And you know, again, where you're included as the evaluator in a couple of the proposals that I helped craft, those nonprofits were awarded those funds, and then I subsequently was awarded the evaluation contract. So that's again another, you know, kind of gray area for some people. So finally, the last sort of thing is like, again, kind of the structure, and I've already sort of talked about this a little bit, like, you know, how you're going to work together. Maybe you don't want to be the middleman, so you only take, you know, the monkey in the middle, so you only take the sort of opportunities where you can have a face-to-face or a, you know, direct contact with the client, so that you can be more of a team, having more of a team approach versus the, you know, kind of just back end approach. So it really kind of, you know, depends on what you prefer, what your relationship is with other grant writing consultants or firms, what their relationships are with the clients they work with, for example. Thinking about that and having conversations to sort of set that up from the beginning is helpful, I think. And finally, like, I'm just wondering, are there other ways to collaborate? Like, perhaps it would be better if grant writers and evaluators teamed up and worked together from the beginning, right, with nonprofits to develop proposals and outcomes. But obviously that would entail the nonprofit being willing to pay for both of you and your services. And, you know, a lot of times that isn't the case. You know, they have to kind of see the value in the evaluation and the learning and being able to support, you know, both. I know many nonprofits, and maybe you guys do too, right, who like have grant writing consultants like and they use them all the time and they're on there, right? Like, kind of, they're not necessarily, sometimes they're internal, but a lot of times it's maybe a consultant, and because they don't have to pay all the benefits and the overhead and all of that. But the evaluation consultant piece is like, well, when we get funded, we'll pull you in as the evaluator, rather than kind of like having them kind of all the time. So it's an interesting sort of conundrum, I think, because it, you know, would be better, I think, to just have more of a team approach from the beginning. But obviously somebody's got to be willing to pay for that. And maybe we just, you know, learn to speak each other's language a little bit better, and just sort of, you know, figuring out how we can support each other, and, you know, of course, you know, refer each other in terms of business development and you know, growing our own consulting practices, but just also strengthening, you know, kind of the field, and you know, how we can all sort of work together better. Because you know how many times you get that the proposal that's written, they get the award, you get called, you know, maybe you didn't have anything to do with it during that writing process, you get called and you look at the outcomes and you're like, like, who put this together? Like, I can't do this. This is impossible. These are not realistic, right? So like, it would be so much better if we could, you know, intervene earlier and not be in that boat where we then have to, you know, retool and refine or try to regroup to, you know, get something that's more realistic in place. So that is all that I really had to share.